Chicago, August 2025. The air was thick with the oppressive heat of late summer, carrying the faint tang of asphalt and diesel from the bustling streets below. Jason Clark stepped out of Mercy General Hospital, his scrubs clinging to his sweat-soaked back. At 40, he was a seasoned surgeon with 15 years of battling death in the operating room. He'd seen hearts stop and start, families collapse in grief, and miracles defy logic. But tonight, as he stood on the hospital's cracked concrete steps, the weight on his shoulders wasn't from a long shift. It was something far heavier. Jason had just been accused of causing the death of 14-year-old Emily Rose, a patient he wasn't even supposed to operate on. The girl had a congenital heart defect, a ticking bomb that no doctor in Chicago had dared to touch. Yet, Nathan Gray, a 28-year-old hotshot surgeon with barely 2 years of experience, had taken the case. Nathan, the son of the hospital's chief of staff, Dr. Edward Gray, strutted through the or like he owned it, his confidence outpacing his skill. When Emily's condition deteriorated mid-surgery, Nathan froze. The girl flatlined, and Nathan vanished, claiming a sudden illness. Jason, ever the dutiful colleague, stepped in to finish what Nathan couldn't. But it was too late. Emily was gone. Now, the Rose family was out for blood. Their grief had morphed into rage, and Jason was their target. They didn't care that he'd been handed a losing hand. They wanted someone to blame. Lawsuits were being drafted, whispers of criminal charges floated through the hospital corridors, and Jason's name was splashed across local news blogs. He could already imagine the headlines. Veteran surgeon's fatal mistake? His career, his reputation, his entire life hung by a thread. Jason trudged toward his car, parked in the dim lot across from the hospital. The city's skyline loomed in the distance, its glittering lights mocking his unraveling world. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it. Probably another reporter or a lawyer sniffing for soundbite. He unlocked his beat-up sedan, the same one he'd driven since his residency days, and sank into the driver's seat. For a moment, he just sat there, staring at the dashboard, the hum of the city fading into a dull roar in his ears. His mind replayed the day of Emily's surgery. Nathan's smug voice echoed, "I've got this, Clark. Trained in Boston, remember?" Jason had warned him. Emily's condition was too fragile, the risks too high. But Nathan brushed him off, and Dr. Gray, Nathan's father, didn't intervene. When a monitor screamed and Emily's vitals crashed, Jason scrubbed in, his hands steady despite the chaos. He fought for her, every second a battle against the inevitable. But her heart wouldn't restart. The hospital had been quick to pin it on Jason. "You were the lead surgeon by the end," Dr. Gray had said, his tone clipped, avoiding Jason's eyes. "We'll handle the fallout, but you need to stay quiet." Jason clenched his jaw at the memory. Quiet? He'd saved Nathan's skin more times than he could count, covering for the younger surgeon's reckless mistakes. But this was different. This was a girl's life, and Jason was being thrown to the wolves. He started the car and pulled on a lakeshore drive, the Chicago River glinting darkly to his left. His apartment in Lincoln Park waited for him, a small one-bedroom that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. 3 years ago, it had been different. His wife, Laura, used to fill the space with laughter, her paint-splattered canvases leaning against every wall. But Laura couldn't handle his 80-hour work weeks, the canceled dinners, the nights he came home smelling of antiseptic and defeat. "You're married to the hospital, not me," she'd said before leaving for Seattle. She'd wanted to chase her art career. He'd wanted a family. They couldn't bridge the gap. Now, the only one waiting for Jason was Buddy, a scruffy mutt he'd found shivering in an alley 2 winters ago. Buddy's wagging tail was the closest thing to warmth Jason had left. But even that couldn't shake the dread pooling in his gut. If the Rose family pushed for criminal charges, he could lose his license. Prison wasn't out of the question. And his colleagues? Some stood by him, like Kate, the sharp-witted nurse who'd seen him at his best and worst. But others were already distancing themselves, their whispers cutting deeper than any scalpel. As he crossed the Chicago River, his phone buzzed again. This time, he glanced at the screen, Dr. Edward Gray. Jason's stomach twisted. He let it go to voicemail, but seconds later, a text popped up, "Come to the hospital. Now, the Roses are here. It's back." Jason gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening. The hospital was a 10-minute drive back, but it felt like a march to the gallows. He pictured Emily's parents, her mother's tear-streaked face, her father's clenched fists. They deserved answers, but Jason didn't have them. All he had was the truth. Nathan botched the surgery, and Jason was the scapegoat. But would anyone believe him over the chief's golden boy? He turned the car around, the city lights blurring as he accelerated. His heart pounded, not from fear of the confrontation, but from a deeper, gnawing question. How had it come to this? He'd spent his life saving others, stitching together broken bodies, defying death. Yet here he was, powerless to save himself. Jason pulled into the hospital lot, the neon sign casting a cold glow over the entrance. As he stepped out, his phone buzzed once more, a voicemail from Dr. Gray. He played it, the older man's voice low and urgent. "Jason, the Roses are talking to lawyers. They're saying malpractice, maybe worse. Get here now, or this gets uglier." The message ended with a click. Jason stood frozen, the humid air pressing against him like a vice. He wasn't just fighting for his career anymore. He was fighting for his freedom. And somewhere, deep down, a spark of defiance flickered. He wasn't going down without a fight. The Chicago River flowed dark and restless beneath the steel lattice of the Franklin Street Bridge. Jason Clark's sedan idled at a red light, the hospital confrontation with the Rose family still looming like a storm cloud. It was past midnight, and the city's pulse had slowed to a low hum, taxis honking faintly, distant sirens cutting through the humid August air. Jason's hands gripped the steering wheel, his mind replaying Dr. Gray's voicemail, the threat of lawsuits, and the betrayal of being made a scapegoat for Nathan's failure. He was a surgeon, trained to stay calm under pressure, but tonight his nerves were fraying. Then he saw her. A young woman, no older than 25, stood on the bridge's pedestrian walkway. Her white dress, delicate and flowing like something from a wedding, glowed faintly under the streetlights. She was gripping the railing, her body leaning forward, too far forward. Jason's breath caught. He'd seen that posture before, in patients who'd lost hope in the split second before they made a choice that couldn't be undone. The light turned green, but Jason didn't move. His eyes locked on her as she swung one leg over the railing. "No," he shouted, slamming the car into park and bolting out the door. His shoes pounded against the pavement, the humid air burning his lungs. "Wait, please." But she didn't turn. With a fluid, almost graceful motion, she let go and plummeted toward the river below. Time slowed. Jason's training kicked in, years of split-second decisions in the oar. He vaulted over the railing, his body hitting the icy water with a shock that stole his breath. The Chicago River was a cold, murky beast, its current tugging at his limbs. He surfaced, gasping, scanning the darkness. There, a flash of white. Her dress billowed on the surface, keeping her afloat like a ghostly beacon. Jason swam hard, his arms slicing through the water. His muscles screamed, but he pushed forward, reaching her just as she began to sink. He hooked an arm around her waist, pulling her head above the surface. "I've got you," he rasped, kicking toward the muddy bank. The river fought him, but he fought harder, dragging her onto the rocky shore. She was limp, her skin pale and clammy, but she was breathing. Jason knelt beside her, checking her pulse, erratic but steady. Her eyes fluttered open, wide and unfocused, brimming with a fear that cut deeper than the cold. Why did you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're safe now," Jason said, his own voice hoarse. He scanned her for injuries, his surgeon's instincts taking over. That's when he saw it, a jagged scar on her wrist, faint but unmistakable. His stomach lurched. "I stitched that," he murmured, the memory flashing back. A late-night ER shift 2 years ago, a young woman with a deep cut, her eyes haunted even then. She nodded weakly, tears mixing with the river water on her cheeks. You were kind." Her name was Abby, she said, her voice barely audible. She shivered violently, her dress clinging to her like a second skin. Jason stripped off his soaked jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "We need to get you warm," he said, helping her to her feet. He couldn't take her to the hospital. Not yet. The place was a minefield, with the Rose family's accusations and Nathan's shadow lurking. His apartment was closer, and Abby needed shelter, not scrutiny. He guided her to his car, her steps unsteady, and drove to his Lincoln Park building. Buddy, his scruffy mutt, greeted them with a curious sniff as they stumbled inside. Jason wrapped Abby in a blanket, handing her a mug of tea. She clutched it but didn't drink, her gaze distant, like she was trapped in a nightmare. "Why did you jump?" Jason asked gently, sitting across from her. Abby's lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she curled tighter into the blanket, her hands trembling. Something was wrong, beyond the trauma of the bridge. Her pupils were dilated, her movements sluggish. Jason's medical training screamed at him. This wasn't just shock. "Abby, I need to check something," he said, grabbing his first aid kit. He took her pulse again, then shone a pin light into her eyes. Her responses were off, too slow, too erratic. "Have you taken anything? Medication? Anything at all?" She shook her head, but her confusion was palpable. I don't know. My husband, he gives me pills. Says they're for stress." Her voice cracked. "I've been seeing things. Hearing things." Jason's blood ran cold. He'd seen cases like this, patients misdiagnosed, overmedicated, or worse. "What's your husband's name?" he asked, keeping his tone steady. "Trevor," she whispered. "Trevor Hayes." The name meant nothing to Jason, but the fear in her eyes told him everything. He grabbed his phone and texted Kate, the nurse he trusted most at Mercy General. "Need a blood panel run. Off the books. Can you help?" Kate replied instantly. "Bring her in. I'll handle it." Jason convinced Abby to go to the hospital, promising to keep her away from prying eyes. At Mercy General, Kate met them in a quiet exam room, her warm brown eyes softening at the sight of Abby's fragile state. While Kate drew blood, Jason paced, his mind racing. If Abby was being drugged, it wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a crime. And something told him it was connected to the hospital, to Nathan, to the mess he was already drowning in. Hours later, Kate slipped into the room with a printout. "You're not going to like this," she said, handing it to Jason. The blood work showed traces of a rare psychotropic drug, clozapine, used for severe psychiatric conditions but dangerous in high doses. It could cause hallucinations, memory loss, even suicidal impulses. "This isn't something you get over the counter," Kate said, her voice low. "Someone's been dosing her, and they knew exactly what they were doing." Jason's jaw tightened. He looked at Abby, now asleep on the exam table, her face peaceful for the first time. She wasn't just a stranger he'd pulled from the river. She was a victim, and her survival was now his responsibility. But how deep did this go? Was Trevor acting alone, or was there a bigger web he'd stumbled into? As Jason studied the lab results, his phone vibrated. A new email from an anonymous sender. He opened it, and his heart stopped. A single line stared back at him. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like her." Attached was a grainy photo of Abby on the bridge, moments before she jumped. Someone had been watching, and now they were watching him. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Staff Lounge buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over Jason Clark's tense frame. It was 3 a.m., and the hospital was a ghost town, save for the occasional beep of a monitor or the soft tread of a night shift nurse. Jason sat hunched over a chipped coffee mug. The anonymous email's words burned into his mind. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like her." The photo of Abby on the bridge haunted him, a stark reminder that someone was watching, someone who knew he'd saved her. His fingers tightened around the mug, the cold ceramic grounding him against the storm in his head. Abby was still in the exam room, resting under Kate's watchful eye. The blood work confirmed she'd been poisoned with clozapine, a psychotropic drug that explained her hallucinations and the despair that drove her to the bridge. Her husband, Trevor Hayes, was the obvious suspect, but Jason's gut told him the truth was Messier. Mercy General was a labyrinth of secrets, and the deeper he dug, the closer he came to the hospital's dark underbelly, a place where Nathan Gray, the reckless surgeon who'd botched Emily Rose's operation, thrived unchecked. Jason pulled out his laptop, the screen's glow harsh against the dim lounge. He cross-referenced Abby's blood work with hospital records, searching for any link to clozapine. His access as a senior surgeon gave him clearance to dig into prescription logs, and within minutes, he found something chilling. Dr. Richard Lennox, a psychiatrist on staff, had ordered clozapine multiple times in the past year. Lennox was a close ally of Nathan Gray, often seen laughing with him in the cafeteria, their arrogance a match set. The prescriptions weren't for Abby, but the pattern was suspicious, patients with vague diagnoses, all linked to Lennox's private clinic downtown. Jason's thoughts raced. Could Lennox be supplying Trevor with a drug? And if so, why? Abby had mentioned Trevor's insistence on vitamins and strange visits to a doctor. If Lennox was that doctor, it pointed to a deliberate attempt to destabilize her, maybe to control her, maybe to claim her inheritance. But what did Nathan have to do with it? The connection was there, just out of reach, like a shadow moving in his peripheral vision. Kate slipped into the lounge, her scrubs wrinkled from hours on her feet. "Abby's stable," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. Her voice was soft but firm, the kind that could calm a panic patient or cut through hospital politics. "She's asking for you. Says she remembered something about Trevor." Jason nodded, closing his laptop. "What did she say?" "She's fuzzy, but she mentioned a safe in their house. Trevor kept papers there, contracts, maybe medical records. She thinks it's why he's been so controlling." Kate's eyes narrowed. "Jason, this is bigger than one bad husband. That email you got? Someone's scared you're getting close." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion clawing at him. "I know, and I think it ties back to Nathan. He's been dodging accountability for Emily's death, and now this? It's too neat." Kate leaned forward, her voice dropping. "You're playing with fire. Nathan's got his father's protection. Dr. Gray will bury you before he lets his son take the fall." Jason's jaw clenched. He'd already confronted Dr. Edward Gray once, demanding answers about Nathan's role in Emily's surgery. Gray's response had been icy. "You're out of your depth, Clark. Stay in your lane." Now, with Abby's life on the line, staying in his lane wasn't an option. He headed to Abby's room, where she sat propped up on the exam table, a hospital blanket draped over her shoulders. Her face was pale, but her eyes held a flicker of resolve. "I'm sorry," she said as he entered, "for dragging you into this." "You didn't drag me," Jason replied, pulling up a stool. "You were on that bridge because someone put you there. Tell me about the safe." Abby's hands twisted the blanket's edge. "Trevor's always been secretive, but it got worse after we married. He'd lock himself in his office, talking to someone on the phone, low, like he didn't want you to hear. I saw the safe once behind a painting. He got me looking, and he changed. Got angry, then too sweet, like he was covering something." "Did he ever mention a Dr. Lennox?" Jason asked. Her brow furrowed. "Maybe. He said the doctor was fixing me. I thought it was for anxiety, but..." She trailed off, her voice cracking. "I trusted him, Jason. How could I be so blind?" "You weren't blind," he said firmly. "You were betrayed." Abby's story lit a fuse in Jason. He needed proof, something to tie Trevor, Lennox, and maybe Nathan together. He stepped into the hall and called Sarah Wilson, a police detective he'd met during a hospital case years ago. Sarah was no-nonsense, with a knack for sniffing out corruption. "I need a favor," he told her, explaining Abby's situation and the email thread. "Can you look into Trevor Hayes and Richard Lennox? Off the record for now." Sarah's voice crackled through the phone. "You're stirring up a hornet's nest, Clark. I'll dig, but you better have something solid before you take this public." Back in the lounge, Jason dove deeper into the hospital's digital archives. He found a buried report. Nathan had been involved in a clinical trial last year, testing psychotropic drugs for a pharmaceutical company. Clozapine was on the list. The trial was shut down after irregularities, but Nathan's name was scrubbed from the final report. Lennox, however, was listed as a consultant. The pieces were falling into place, but Jason needed more. He slipped into the hospital's pharmacy records, his heart pounding as he typed. There was a requisition for clozapine, signed by Lennox, dated just weeks before Abby's symptoms started. It wasn't proof of a crime, but it was a thread to pull. As dawn broke, Jason's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Trevor Hayes has ties to a shell company linked to Lennox's clinic. Money's moving, big sums. Be careful." Careful wasn't in Jason's vocabulary anymore. He was done playing defense. Jason was about to head back to Abby when the lounge door swung open. Nathan Gray stood there, his usual smirk replaced by a cold stare. "You're poking around where you don't belong, Clark," he said, his voice low and venomous. "Drop it, or I'll make sure the roses aren't your only problem." Before Jason could respond, Nathan turned and vanished down the hall. The threat hung in the air like smoke, but it only fueled Jason's resolve. He wasn't just fighting for Abby now. He was fighting to expose a conspiracy that reached the heart of Mercy General. The Chicago skyline glittered through the hospital window, but Jason Clark saw only shadows. It was early morning, the city waking under a haze of August heat. Yet inside Mercy General, the air felt suffocating. Nathan Gray's threat still echoed in Jason's ears. "Drop it, or I'll make sure the roses aren't your only problem." The words were a blade, sharp and precise, but they didn't scare Jason. They ignited him. He was done being the hospital's scapegoat, done letting Nathan's arrogance destroy lives. Abby's survival, and his own redemption, depended on exposing the truth. Jason paced the staff lounge, his laptop open to the clozapine requisition signed by Dr. Richard Lennox. The drug had been used to poison Abby, driving her to the edge of sanity and the Franklin Street Bridge. Trevor Hayes, her husband, was the likely culprit, but the ties to Lennox and Nathan hinted at a larger scheme. Detective Sarah Wilson's text about Trevor's shell company linked to Lennox's clinic was a lifeline, but Jason needed hard evidence, something to crack the conspiracy wide open. Abby was awake now, sitting in her exam room with a cup of tea Kate had brought her. Her hands still trembled, but her eyes burned with a quiet determination. "I want to help," she told Jason, her voice steadier than before. "If Trevor's doing this to me, I need to know why." Jason hesitated. Abby was fragile, her body still recovering from the clozapine's effects. But her resolve was unshakable, and he knew she deserved a chance to fight back. "The safe you mentioned," he said, sitting beside her. "If we can get those documents, it could tie Trevor to Lennox. Maybe even Nathan." Abby nodded, her jaw tightening. "I can get into the house. Trevor's at his office downtown until noon. I know the code to the safe." "It's risky," Jason warned. "If he catches you, he's already taken everything from me." She cut in, her voice fierce. "My mind, my trust. I won't let him take my future too." Jason felt a surge of respect for her. He called Sarah Wilson, laying out the plan. Abby would retrieve the documents, while Sarah and Jason monitored the house from distance. Sarah was skeptical, but agreed. "If this goes south, I'm pulling the plug," she said, her voice crackling over the phone. "And Clark? Don't play hero." By 10 a.m., they were in position. Abby drove to her upscale Lakeview home, a sleek townhouse that screamed Trevor's wealth. Jason and Sarah parked a block away in Sarah's unmarked sedan, the detective's eyes scanning the street like a hawk. Jason's pulse thrummed, his surgeon's hands itching for action. He'd spent years staying calm in life-or-death situations, but this was different. This was personal. Inside, Abby moved quickly. The house felt foreign, its polished floors and modern art a stark contrast to the chaos Trevor had sown in her life. She slipped into his office, her heart pounding as she lifted the painting to reveal the safe. Her fingers shook as she punched in the code. Her wedding date, a cruel irony. The door clicked open, revealing a stack of papers and a USB drive. She skimmed the documents, contracts, bank transfers, and a letter from Lennox detailing treatment protocols for Abby, laced with medical jargon meant to justify the clozapine. The USB drive held audio files, recordings of Trevor and Lennox discussing patient compliance and asset control. Abby's blood ran cold. Trevor hadn't just wanted her money. He'd planned to have her declared incompetent, locking her away in a psychiatric facility. She stuffed the evidence into a bag, but as she turned to leave, the front door clicked open. Trevor was home. Abby froze, her breath catching. His footsteps echoed on the hardwood, slow and deliberate. "Abby," he called, his voice smooth but edged with suspicion. "You here, sweetheart?" Jason, watching from the car, saw Trevor's BMW pull up unexpectedly. "He's early," he hissed, grabbing his phone to text Abby. No response. Sarah's hand went to her radio, ready to call for backup, but Jason was already moving. "I'm going in," he said, ignoring her protest. He sprinted to the house, slipping through the back door Abby had left unlocked. Inside, he heard Trevor's voice, now sharp with anger. "You were in my office, weren't you?" Abby's reply was muffled, but her fear was palpable. Jason crept closer, peering around the corner. Trevor stood over Abby, gripping her arm, the bag of documents at her feet. "You think you can outsmart me?" he snarled. Jason didn't think, he acted. "Let her go," he shouted, stepping into the room. Trevor spun, his face twisting with rage. "You," he spat. "The hero doctor. You're in way over your head." Am I? Jason said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. The police are outside, Trevor. Those documents? They're your ticket to prison. Trevor's eyes darted to the bag, then back to Jason. For a moment, it seemed he might back down. Then he lunged, shoving Abby aside and swinging at Jason. Years of long shifts had kept Jason fit, and he dodged, grabbing Trevor's arm and twisting it behind his back. Abby scrambled for the bag, clutching it like a lifeline. Sarah burst through the door, her badge flashing. "Hands up, Hayes," she barked. Trevor froze, his bravado crumbling as two uniformed officers followed, cuffing him. Abby sank against the wall, tears streaming down her face, but her grip on the evidence never faltered. Back at the precinct, Sarah reviewed the documents and USB. "This is dynamite," she said, her voice grim. Lennox was running a side hustle, dosing patients to manipulate them. Trevor was his client, but there's more. Nathan Gray's name keeps popping up in the financials. Jason's heart sank. Nathan wasn't just a reckless surgeon. He was neck-deep in this. But he was still out there, protected by his father's influence. Jason knew the fight wasn't over. As Jason drove Abby back to the hospital, his phone lit up with a new message from the anonymous sender. "You got lucky with Hayes. But Nathan's untouchable. Keep pushing, and you'll lose everything." The words sent a chill down his spine, but they also steeled his resolve. Trevor was down, but Nathan and Lennox were still in play, and Jason was ready to bring them to justice, no matter the cost. The Chicago courthouse loomed against the gray September sky, its stone facade as unyielding as the truth Jason Clark was determined to unveil. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the hum of whispers and the shuffle of papers filling the courtroom. Jason sat in the witness stand, his surgeon's hand steady, but his heart racing. Today wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about justice for Emily Rose, for Abby, and for every life tainted by the conspiracy he'd uncovered at Mercy General. The past weeks had been a whirlwind. Trevor Hayes' arrest had cracked open a Pandora's box, exposing a web of corruption that reached deep into the hospital. The documents Abby retrieved from Trevor's safe, combined with the USB recordings, painted a damning picture. Dr. Richard Lennox had been running an illicit operation, using psychotropic drugs like clozapine to manipulate vulnerable patients. Trevor had paid Lennox to dose Abby, planning to declare her incompetent and seize her inheritance. But the real shock was Nathan Gray's involvement. The young surgeon, shielded by his father, Dr. Edward Gray, had been a silent partner, funneling money through a pharmaceutical trial to fund Lennox's scheme. Jason's testimony was the linchpin. He recounted Emily Rose's botched surgery, Nathan's negligence, and the hospital's rush to pin the blame on him. He detailed Abby's poisoning, the clozapine in her blood, and the paper trail linking Nathan and Lennox. The evidence was ironclad: bank records, audio files, and Lennox's own patient logs, which Sarah Wilson had seized in a raid on his clinic. The courtroom hung on Jason's every word, the Rose family watching with tear-streaked faces, their anger now directed at the true culprits. Nathan sat at the defense table, his usual swagger gone, replaced by a pale, hunted look. Lennox, beside him, stared at the floor, his career in ruins. Dr. Edward Gray was absent, having resigned as chief of staff days earlier, unable to bear the public disgrace. The prosecutor, Elena Ruiz, pressed Jason with precision, drawing out every detail. When she played the USB recording of Trevor and Lennox discussing Abby's treatment, a gasp rippled through the room. The defense tried to discredit Jason, painting him as a disgruntled employee with a vendetta. But their arguments crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Sarah Wilson took the stand next, her testimony about the shell company and money transfers sealing Nathan's fate. Abby, though trembling, spoke last. Her voice was soft but unwavering as she described the hallucinations, the fear, and the betrayal by the man she'd loved. "Jason saved me," she said, her eyes meeting his. "He gave me my life back." The verdict came swiftly. Nathan and Lennox were convicted of fraud, medical malpractice, and attempted murder. Nathan faced 7 years in prison, Lennox 10. Trevor, already pleading guilty, got 8. The judge's gavel fell like a thunderclap, and the courtroom erupted in murmurs. The Rose family approached Jason outside, Emily's mother sobbing as she hugged him. "We were wrong about you," she whispered. "Thank you for the truth." But the trial's end brought an unexpected revelation. Sorting through hospital records to close the case, Sarah uncovered a file that stopped Jason cold. Abby was his half-sister. Their mother, who'd struggled with addiction and lost custody of Abby as a baby, had never told Jason about her. The scar on Abby's wrist, which he'd stitched years ago, was no coincidence. It was fate. When he told Abby, her eyes filled with tears, but a smile broke through. "Family," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "I never thought I'd have one." Jason's life began to shift. He and Kate, the nurse who'd stood by him through the chaos, started dating, their bond forged in shared battles. Kate's warmth filled the voids Laura's departure had left, and Jason found himself laughing again, the weight of his past lifting. Abby, now free from Trevor, moved into a small apartment in Wicker Park, determined to rebuild. She started therapy, joined a support group, and even began volunteering at a women's shelter, her strength growing daily. One crisp October evening, Jason stood on the Franklin Street Bridge, where it all began. The river below sparkled under the city lights, its current calm. He held a faded photo of his mother, young and smiling, with a baby Abby in her arms. "We did it," he whispered, tucking the photo into his pocket. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Not just a surgeon, but a brother, a partner, a man who'd faced injustice and won. Abby joined him, her coat pulled tight against the autumn chill. "You ever think about that night?" she asked, glancing at the water. "Every day," Jason admitted, "but not with regret. It brought us here." She nodded, her gaze distant but hopeful. "I'm starting a foundation for people like me, hurt by the system. Will you help?" Jason smiled, his heart full. "Always." As they walked off the bridge, Chicago's skyline stretched before them, a canvas of possibility. Jason knew the scars of the past would linger. His divorce, Emily's death, the hospital's betrayal. But they no longer defined him. He'd fought for truth, for Abby, for himself. And in that fight, he'd found a future worth living for. Later that night, Jason's phone pinged with a final message from Sarah. Lennox confessed to everything. Named Nathan as the mastermind. "You're officially cleared." Jason exhaled, the last knot of fear unraveling. He looked at Abby, laughing with Kate over dinner in his apartment, but he sprawled at their feet. The conspiracy was dead, its architects in chains. Jason was free, and for the first time he felt truly home.